Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastination Pit Stop. I am sitting here with another amazing guest. I have with me Dr. Danisha Keating, who overcame a turbulent childhood in foster care, surviving not only homelessness, but guardianship of her siblings, and 33 moves by age 24, to ultimately earn her PhD and become a best-selling author of From Foster to PhD and Taking My Voice Back. Now a global advocate for foster youth, she shares her story to spark systemic change, champion unredacted access to personal records, and inspire others to achieve their own Foster 2 journeys. Denisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming onto the show. We had an interesting green room interaction, so I'm looking forward to this episode.
Those are the best
Before we do dive in,
conversations.
yeah. Before we dive in, though, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show, and the question for you today is: which cartoon character do you identify with the most, and why?
So I identify with Ariel because even at the age of 8, I understood that running away from someone who was controlling felt better at the time, but also that the way that we planned things to happen was not going to actually happen. Now, the difference between Ariel and myself is she had a loving family. Did not. But understanding that just because someone says something doesn't mean they're going to be truthful and honest, and what we want to have happen may not actually be the outcome that we thought, without some road bumps in the way and definitely handling some evil people in between.
No, I like that. I like that example, and I love how you explained it at the end too. Because I personally never really thought of it that way. But yeah, no, I get it. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Just sliding into it.
hmm
How do you define procrastination, and what does it mean to you personally?
Procrastination is my husband laughs at me when I say I'm a procrastinator, but procrastination is putting things off because we don't want to have to deal with them. Sometimes that it can be a small task, and sometimes it's a very large task. I know within my bachelor's program, I put papers off by 2 or 3 weeks and I would not do well in my class. But then there's other things like putting the laundry away that I just don't want to deal with it. I don't have the energy. And it turned into some bigger things like brushing my hair daily, or cleaning my home, or even just not paying a bill because I wanted to push it off 2 or 3 weeks just because I didn't want to have to deal with that particular thing.
And we all know that there's no like silver bullet, no one cure fixes all because everybody's all different. But what was you saw a kind of secret sauce to overcoming procrastination?
I had to realign specifically what was important to me. I found the things that I didn't care about is what I was pushing off. So if it was that paper I didn't care about, or that bill, I was like, I don't really care about the phone. Those were the things that I would move. But the things I really did care about, I would get done within the time frame I needed to get it done in. But I think really what we have to sit back down to do is reevaluate why is it important, and why did we say yes to this particular thing? When we lost the spunk behind why we said yes to it, I think we could just get to a point where we're like, I don't want this anymore. I don't agree, it's taking longer than I wanted it to, or I just don't have the energy. And we have to move from that motivation focus of I'll do it tomorrow when I have energy, to moving to say I need to get this done, because if I get this done, it's not there tomorrow. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I have the time right now. I might not have that time tomorrow. So I had to move from waiting for motivation to happen and energy to happen to, if I don't get this done, I can't move to the next step of what I need to do, and then focusing more on the determination piece.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that goes back to kind of like one of my favorite quotes. I have no idea who to credit it with, but it's when your why is high, your cost is low, right? So I was definitely a big proponent of that.
hmm
I can actually almost see and hear the eyes rolling back in their heads now, because I'm going to ask a question that I always ask the authors. Now, you've written not only one, but you've written 2 books. And the saying goes, 98% of writing a book is procrastination and 2% is actually doing it. How
Yeah,
true is that for you?
100% true. So I've actually written 3 books, but my first one was a flop because of how much I put it off. I wrote the book, got it done in about a couple months, published it, but never actually sent it to anybody. Never put it up on social media, and I just kind of let that fall because I didn't really care about it. I just wanted to get one done. The second book that I sold, though, I published it, self-published it, got it done in probably a couple months because I was pulling together journals and then redacting some information I didn't really want the world to see. names, more situations that involved other people that I just didn't feel the world needed to read. And that took a couple months just to make sure to sit on to read through it. But because I was wanting this to get out there, I wanted that message from Foster to PhD to get out there. I started to pitch it, even when people didn't want it. I would call schools and say, "Hey, do you work with foster youth?" They're like, "Yes." It's like, "I have a book for you that you would absolutely love because it goes through the emotions of what it's like to go through education." And I ended up selling 3,500 copies since 2021 because I was just like, let's go. Now, this next book, it's funny. I wrote Taking My Voice Back in 2, maybe 3 weeks total because I was just like, knock it out. Like, let's go. And now I'm starting to pitch it. I wrote that in November. I started writing it in end of September, got it completely done by early October, sent it to 3 different people to look through, read through, provide feedback, made adjustments, and then pre-sold it for November and sold 250 copies right away. And I was able to put like this whole package together and ship that off because I was willing to say, you know what, this book is more important to me than just pushing this off by a year or 2 years like I have with other books that I wasn't as passionate about. I have 1,000 book ideas and I've only published 3 of them because it does take a lot of work. But I think when we don't know what our messaging is for this particular thing, we're just like, it's a good idea, but we don't have that oomph behind of why it needs to be in the world, we will put it off. And that's something that's like, yeah, I have 1,000 ideas and only 3 are published. But the last one only took 2.5 weeks because it was something that I'm like, I want people to understand that there is this thing happening with not just people who are foster youth, but just people in general of our voices are being silenced when it comes to trying to heal from our trauma. We try to find information from our family. We try to dig into our past and often hit road bumps to the truth because people just are ashamed. And it's a silent generational thing happening where it's like, that's the one thing everybody can say, yeah, none of my family talked about these kind of things because it was shamed or it was told not to. We were told not to. So then taking it to the another side of it where I want other people to find healing and know that they can heal and that healing is layered and will always be part of us versus what we hear the narrative of right now is you can heal and be healed and be done and you'll never have to deal with it again. It's like, no, lifelong trauma, things that hit us for years or decades is something that we might have to heal from in layers. It's not going to be all at once. It's going to randomly come back and we're going to deal with it again. And that's not making us weak. So it was the messaging behind it is why you're either going to do it or not. And that I think where a lot of authors struggle is that they don't really believe in this project that they're putting out there. And really, it's not that they don't believe in the book itself. They don't believe people are going to want it. So they don't believe in the ultimate, get it out there, push it out there, let people read it. It's, well, nobody's going to want it. Nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to care about it. There's just another one in the pile. And it's like, do you really believe that the world needs this message, even if it's just one person? If you do believe that, then you need to get it out there.
You know, that there's so much in there that I kind of want to get into.
Yeah.
But the first part of what you said was really interesting to me. The first book you put out, you said that it wasn't kind of like important to you. So let me ask you, what was the motivation to put that first one out?
I was working on my doctoral program at the time, and I wanted just to get something because I had so many different ideas, from songs I wanted to write to books I wanted to write to wanting to kind of just put myself on the map somewhere. But I think I had like maybe total I published it in 2019. But from then to now, there's probably only like 19 copies sold. So it was all friends. My friends were just like, I'm buying it because I need to support you. But it was, I just wanted to write something. Now it's called Faith Through the Desert, but there were things about it that I was really disappointed with how the format came out. Not realizing that I could fix that at the time, I just kind of left it alone. So I was like, I don't want to push it because instead of it being full pages, it's literally half the page. And someone's like, I actually thought you did that on purpose. I thought you left me margins to make notes. And I was like, yes, that's what I did. Not really, but it was that thing that it's like, oh, well, it's kind of my first book. Nothing's really going to happen, but I want to complete something so I can say that I did it. But then I realized and recognized some things I wanted to change in the second book that again, it just felt like the second book was a little bit more important. Faith Through the Desert, it was more of my spiritual journey of uncovering like how my life went. But with From Foster to PhD, I had found that there was not a lot of foster youth sharing their stories in a triumphant way. It was a lot of trauma narrative where it was just like, here's my story, which is important, but it is really hard for people to read through because it is a lot of trauma. And I didn't want to have another book out there that may create other foster youth not being able to read it because it was triggering to them and it actually made them spiral. So I was like, I want something where they can see she's going to make it. But I also need someone to relate to when it comes to how education feels. It is abnormal for foster youth to actually be able to graduate. Right now, 50% of them are graduating high school. 3% are graduating from college with an associate's or a bachelor's. 1% of foster youth are graduating with a master's. There is no number for doctoral holders and foster youth. So it is this thing where it's like, I need this population to understand that we can have our From Foster to Blink stories. Because what we're told is, well, you're just going to end up in jail, on drugs, teen pregnant. You're going to end up, nobody's going to want you. You're going to be homeless. You're not going to make it in this world. So I wanted, the passion behind that was, it wasn't about me anymore. Like the first book was just for my own saying I did it. Versus the second one was like, I need someone who's ready to quit right now to say someone like me is out there doing this, so I can too. So the passion changed from, I just want my book out there to, if someone else is reading this, I want them to not give up.
No, thank you for sharing. No, that makes a lot of sense. That brings me kind of to my second question now is why the book as a medium? When you've got like podcasts, you've got TikToks, you've got blogs, you've got newsletters, you've got
there is a lot of people who are hiding behind what they really believe. They're hiding it. They liking somebody's video exposes them. Not in the sense of like political beliefs, but really like pains and hurts. I use social media to share my story so that if someone they don't have to like it or comment, but there are so many times that they will private message me and just say like, hey, I didn't want to comment or share this because I can't admit this publicly. I can't express this to my family or my friends. Nobody knows what I went through. Everyone denied it. So now it is, social media, there feels like this moment of exposure that it's like if I like it or watch it or someone catches me watching it, it is harder to justify and hide it. Versus a book, it's like, oh, it's for my class. Oh, someone gave it to me. Oh, my friend left it in my bag. So it's easier to excuse it without being caught that it's their book. And you could leave notes in there and highlights in there and people won't be able to really tell if it's you unless they expose themselves in that way. And books, I don't know, there's something about opening a book and not just consuming audibly that when we open and crack open that book and we start highlighting and we start making our own notes, it actually imprints on our brain. So it's very old school, like research shows that us writing stuff out, we're going to remember that better than just saying it. So this is where it goes down to if someone is actually processing what they went through and seeing that somebody else goes through it, they're putting down notes or jotting down notes or feelings, and they're actually being able to release what's internal to them. But again, if someone were to pick that book up and find it, they'd be like, it's somebody else's. Somebody left it. My classmate left it on their desk and I just meant to give it back. I just haven't had a chance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard anybody explain it that way before.
It's different. TikTok and social media, YouTube, when we like something, people can see that. And that feels like, even though no one's judging, it just feels like it's exposing us a little bit more. If we like that someone else has shared their story on abuse, someone could say like, hey, were you abused? And it's like, I don't want to talk to you about this at all. There's no way to anonymously follow people.
No, that's another point. And the one of the other things that you touched on was, they didn't necessarily want to put out a book because they weren't sure who would want to read it. They've got to compete with. And here's a statistic for you that I found really hard to believe, and I'm still blown away by it. There's like 10,000 titles published a day. And a lot of them are AI written. So now, not only are you, I went through this myself, by the way. Not only are you, well, I have a whole story about my book, but it's not going to go into that. Do you have the, the motivation to actually sit down and write something when
Right.
you have the risk that somebody's going to go on to Amazon the next day. They're going to maybe pull the few excerpts, toss it in AI, and then make like 5 or 6 copies and then sell it for $1.90, which
Right.
is a legitimate thing that's happening. There are
Right.
companies out there that are promoting this method where you get into ChatGPT or Luminous AI or whatever the flavor of the day is, and you just spit out all these books. It's very disheartening. And
100%.
but what's your response to those people? Like, how would you motivate somebody to do that?
I am not worried by AI because here's the deal is I have sat next to someone who used AI versus I did not, and they weren't able to answer a question about their book. They were like, what do you mean that was in there? It's like having someone ghostwrite for you. It's the same thing. You're having this whole conversation and they're like, I never put that in there. And you're like, you did. You really did. And there's that piece. But what there's this authenticity of sharing your story that happens. AI can fake it, but it's not a real person. I'm going to bring this up because it's kind of funny, but when I was homeschooled before, like that was just a big part of my life, being homeschooled from preschool to kindergarten before I was put into high school at a public school. But we had just gotten AOL, and you could IM yourself. And you would IM yourself, hey, and it would kick back a hey. You would say, how are you? And kick back to how are you? I talked to myself daily this way because I wanted so desperately a friend. But it wasn't just to talk to someone. I needed someone to physically sit there. I was at my happiest when I had friends. I'm at my happiest when I have my friends with me. I'm lower in more of my anxiety and depression that I've experienced. That's lower when I'm around people who understand what it's like to go through things. I feel on guard when I'm sitting with someone who's like, oh, I stubbed my toe and my whole world came crashing down. And I'm like, cute. That I can't relate to. But if I were to sit with someone and say, hey, they read this book and they're saying, hey, I can relate to this. I understand this. What did you do? And I start saying, well, I just prayed about it and gave it to God and she just took it away. People are going to go, okay, I've tried that. That's very disconnected from what you just said in your book. So now you're losing authenticity and you're losing the connection with who you thought that author was. That very quickly, we're going to see that. We see this every day where people like jump from one spectrum to the next of whatever their values are. And you're just like, oh, I don't trust you because you're someone who just keeps jumping around. It's the same thing with authors, is that if you're just trying to get the next hit piece to make $1, eventually your following is going to understand that you're just pushing this book, AI or not, I am just a book sale to you. Versus you are creating something to say, you know what, I want to bring you into a piece of my life that was hard to process or exciting to go through. And I want to be that person that when you do message, that's you on the other end. And that's actually the same reason of why I answer every single message that comes in. I answer every comment that goes onto my social media because I want people to know, like, I'm a real person. I don't have a team handling that for me. That's me. That's a human being to human being. You can talk to an AI all day, but you're still going to have, and the research that has come out on it is actually showing that anxiety of that person, the depression of that person is sky high because it's not a real human. They also have like lower self-esteem, as well as they're just more isolated and they just don't, there's no human connection for them. So yeah, AI can be really scary where it's like, oh shoot, like I'm going to have to compete with that. Or you can do old school techniques versus using things like AI marketing where it goes out and pushes it for you. You can run ads on social media. You can call places directly that like support programs for whatever group that might fit this. You like, for example, if you do a book on healing, why not call a couple therapists that you know? Because again, when we get someone who understands what it's like, we're going to connect better with them. So AI, I know a lot of people are terrified of it. And I'm not worried. I think that we had the same expression when we went from cash to credit cards or debit cards. People had the same response where it was like, we're never going to do that. And I'm like, it could help people get better ideas and how to structure it a little bit better. But I don't think that you will really be able to replace real human connection. I think there are more issues with people falsifying what they went through and feeling that they have to share very vulnerable parts of their story without actually wanting to. I think that's more of an issue for people who write then that they're going to have to really compete with something that doesn't exist.
And you keep coming up with these two pathways we can go down, and
Sorry, we can go
no, no,
down both
no,
ways.
no.
It's fine.
It's tough. It's tough to decide because you hit on two very important aspects there, and I wanted to dig a little more in. I guess so. I'll I'll pick on the maybe that's the wrong word. I'm not going to pick on it, but you mentioned about the studies, and this is fascinating area to me because my biggest fear with AI, aside from you know, the whole soft skill jobs going away within the next decade or whatever,
Right.
kicking that elephant out of the room, going back to, having, anxiety and these different things in kids. And I'm
Hmm.
witnessing this myself because I
Yeah.
mean, my own daughter's going through this. The sort of the dichotomy there is that this is not known to help them, and yet they
Right.
are starting to prefer interaction with the AI chats, like character AI. Yes, I called you out. Yes, go ahead, sue me. I don't care. Character AI. And um, you know, these things that happen. I expected to have to talk to my daughter about, actual boyfriend interactions, right? But no, it was on character AI, and I'm like, okay, well, so now it's like they're not getting any like they're not getting any benefit, but they're getting the validation.
Right.
And
Which is what they're
it's
not
just
feeling from
so,
people around them.
yeah, and it's just so, how where are we going to go? Because I mean, why do I want to have a relationship with somebody who's going to argue with me? Why do I want to have a
Well,
relationship?
yeah, there's that
Yeah,
piece. But I also think, how old is your daughter, if you don't mind me asking?
she's 12.
12. Okay. So middle school?
Yeah.
Middle school girls are bullies. Sorry, everybody. It's true. Why would you want to have a best friend who tells you you look ugly today when you could have someone who says you are so beautiful? And there's hormones that take place. There's a dopamine hit that when we get a compliment or we get a like or we get a view, there's a dopamine hit that happens. It's an addiction. Social media is addictive because it gives us a consistent dopamine thing. To counteract that, we need to create real world situations where we're out there enjoying life. You can get the same dopamine hit under the sun, but we're not outside playing anymore. We're not outside. A part of that is families. We're not in community. We're not sitting and going to park days. We're not really spending time together because we're all working. And I totally understand that. But will your kid want to play in dirt at 12? Probably not. But would your kid want to have a conversation with someone who loves and cares for them? I would hope so. But if you can get that on your phone, why would you get off your phone? And I struggled with that for a little bit. I actually, the same thing happened with me with when I was in high school, was texting people. That's where young girls will often get targeted by older men because they will share things like, oh, you're so beautiful. And then you get into things that are unfortunate, things like sexting or sending bad photos. Those things are happening now with AI because it's readily available on their phone. So it is one thing to teach your kids. We have to show people etiquette. We have to show our kids how that is actually dangerous. We don't know who's actually getting that information. And we think that people would be someone to respect not sharing that. But what we have found is that usually it's going toward a person and that person is using it for very bad things. And it's so bringing people to awareness of that this is not as innocent as we were hoping it was going to be. That person on the other end, we cannot trust them. We don't know them, especially when it's an AI companion. Where is that information going? And if you do a Google search and just look up somebody's name, everything they post on social media is there. Look up an actress and say, look at how this AI stuff, they took her face and put it on this fake body. This is not even her. That helps bring awareness to saying, hey, this isn't as innocent as you think it is. And that I think it's terrifying that people don't want to have these conversations with their kids or with their friends and to say, hey, it's not as innocent as you think it is. It is actually pretty dangerous to let yourself wrap yourself into this. And no, nobody likes an argument, but that's what makes us good people is that we can have an argument, we can have a disagreement, and we still care about each other. But in middle school, I find that a lot of girls struggle the most with identity because especially girls, they're really, really rude to each other. So it is about being like, hey, you can call your friend out and say, that's not nice. Don't say that to me. AI companion is just as dangerous as a human being being on that other side.
No, that's a very good point and actually a very good parallel. How the AI and in some cases, actually, I've heard the opposite said that, oh well, I'd rather my kid talk to the AI than be on Facebook because at least the AI is not going to stick her into a van.
You
But
have
you
no
just raised the
idea
point, like, yeah, who's getting that information?
who's collecting the information. Because if, okay, AI companion, okay, it's a robot who programmed it, but where is that photo going when they send it? It doesn't matter if they're fully clothed and they just send a selfie for the day, but it is being used by someone somewhere. And that is dangerous because they can ping IP addresses. They can ping where the phone is at all times. So it's like, hey, it's not actually as safe as you would hope it would be. Let's show our kids how to have relationships. Let's show our kids that you can get into a tiff with your friend and walk into that and deal with it and walk away from it and be healthy still. Those things, I think, is we have not shown younger generations how to have tiffs, because all we see right now when we look online is everybody fighting. Why would I want to enter into every conversation for an argument? We have to show our kids that not every argument is there.
No, that's right, and that brings up something else too. I mean, we talked about authenticity just a moment ago. You brought up authenticity, and there's two parts to that, right? The first part is that now it's almost like authenticity is being craved, and they feel like they have to share things that aren't authentic. But then we have this other side of it, right? With AI, we want to be authentic, but we've got completely fake people out there, right? Do you think that AI is going to force us to be more authentic or force us to be less authentic?
I think there's a difference. I would hope that we would understand there's a difference between authenticity and transparency. Because I think as a writer, one of the things that we are taught is like, you want to be authentically who you are. So write the way that you want to write. I write jokes in my stuff, especially if things are really heavy. That was one of the big differences, is I let my personality come through in this last book, taking my voice back, because I was like, look, I don't want to try to be something I'm not. And I'm going to make Disney references. I'm going to make food references here. I'm going to be like, we need to slow down for a second because this is too heavy. I need a moment. Let's take a moment and come back to this later. That's more authentic. But what we've been taught as authors is that we need to be transparent in sharing all of our details, which is, on my side, being in that I was raised in abuse and in foster care. One of the big questions I always get is, give me your details so I can weigh if it was as bad as you feel it was. That I don't need to put in a book. I don't need to reveal. And this is what's happening, is people are having to reveal certain things that they didn't want to tell people in a book so people will buy it. We don't need to be transparent in all of the things that we have gone through. Now, if I'm being authentic, I'm going to be like, look, I make mistakes daily, but I'm not going to be like, well, and then this is what that mistake was, unless it fits the conversation. I don't need to just say, well, there are never, and I'm seeing this a lot from authors, ever before told stories in this new book. You have to buy it. You have to get it. I dig into this and I uncovered my trauma in these 3 situations that I never have even told somebody until this book. Then they closed their computer, they published it, and now they're having to deal with this in therapy versus being able to work through it first and then deliver it in a way that could actually help someone grow. It literally is trauma porn, where we are just saying, throw it all down on paper for a sale. When you get that book deal or that sale come in, you look at it and you're like, this was it. I got $5 from this. And now 100 people know this deep, dark thing that hurt me. Okay, now a creepy person's coming in my inbox saying how they would have fixed it at that age. Like, that's weird to me. And I've had, even just with having dyslexia, this is where I kind of was like, there's a difference between transparency and authenticity. I was at a speaking event. I did not know this person, and he walked up to me and he's like, hey, I was abused sexually too. And I was like, I'm standing here, not even the event has not even started. It's an hour before. I don't know you. And he followed me around the room and he goes, I bet that you also went through this, this, and this. Did this happen to you? Did that happen to you? Oh, you have dyslexia? Me too. And I went, I'm sorry, how do you know all of this? Because that wasn't in that book. And he's like, oh, I'm just taking a guess just to see what would make you have a reaction. And I was like, This is why I will never put my details out there, because I don't need more of those conversations. I don't need to feel on guard to where I have to tell a staff member like, hey, can you make sure that this person doesn't come around me? He's now following me around the room, asking questions. And it did turn out that there were, there was autism and things like that. So he was just trying to say like, hey, I can connect to you. But I did say like, hey, the question you're asking is very inappropriate. I'm not going to tell that to you. But then later when I did share, I was like, you know what? We know why kids enter into foster care. There's multiple different reasons. We know why these things happen. One of the gentlemen who was not special needs, was not neurodivergent, was not a student, was like, I need to straight up, I need you to tell me what your abuse specifically was. And I said, I'm sorry, why are you asking? And he said, I need to weigh that it was as bad as you say it was. And I said, you need to not ask that question ever to anybody. And he's like, well, then I just don't think you actually went through it. And I'm like, that's your opinion. Thank you. And they were just like, okay, you're done. And I was just like, this is really weird. And that's where I'm still authentically me in sharing my information the way that I see fit, the way that I would be proud of leaving a room versus saying, you know what, and I've done it before where I felt forced into giving the details because they said you need to. And when I said, no, thank you, I'm not going to, someone said, well, here's what she went through. And I said, excuse me, I said I did not want that information shared. You're not accurately sharing it anyway. Please don't continue. And they continued. I received that check from that event and I bawled. And I said, this was not worth it. This was not worth being violated in public. And so I stopped working with that person because, again, giving you all my details and transparency, if it's not authentically the way I want to do it, it's actually not authentic. I'm forcing myself just to get a dollar bill. That's happening in books, that's happening in speaking events, and we have to be able to say, if you want to share it, go for it. But it has to be because you want to, and I always share, it should be with a plan of why. Why are we sharing this information? Why is that important for the audience to know? Is it worth having someone in the audience spiral emotionally because they went through the same thing just so that you can get that? Or is it better to say, I don't need to go into the details because that's actually going to hurt someone in this room. It'll make them spiral, and I don't want that to be why they're triumphant. My abuse does not make me triumphant. My abuse doesn't make me cool. The way that I said, you know what, I'm not going to let this stuff, I'm not letting foster care or the things that I grew up in or poverty or having to take 8 years to get my bachelor's done to be what made me. It was part of my life, but it was not who I am. Who I am is how I overcame those things. That's what makes me authentically me, not the situation that I had to deal with. But that, I think, is the hardest part is people are like, well, where's the authenticity if you're using AI? Some people are just using it for a plan. Some people are just like, what should it be called? But others are saying, write it for me. You're going to sit across from that person and be like, wow, one, you don't know what you're talking about. Clearly, it's not lining to the book. But two, like, you're not how you portrayed in the book. And I think we've seen that with, like, when we meet our favorite celebrity and we've seen them on TV and we're like, oh my gosh, and they're a total jerk to us. It's that same thing where it's just like, wow, you portrayed someone totally different on TV, even in every single interview. And then I found you on the street and you were just like, get out of my way. And you're like, don't, they have that saying, don't meet your heroes. That's why. So do we want to be the person that people walk away from going, I really messed that I should not have met them, versus being like, they were better in person than online or in their book.
The most concerning thing, I think, out of everything that you said there to me was the fact that this person wanted to weigh
Yes,
the trauma to see if it was worth it.
it's not the only time I've heard it. I was very surprised. I have been called names by sharing my story, saying that, like, taking my siblings in made me a white savior, that I was just looking for, by taking my siblings in, I was looking for attention. By sharing my story online, I'm just looking for likes. None of my stuff actually happened. I'm attention seeking. I'm just saying that I went through stuff, but I really didn't. And then people have said, like, oh, you can tell me, several people have said, tell me the details and I'll tell you if it was that bad. And I'm like, no, we're fine. Like, I don't need you to validate it. CPS already did. And they did a poor job anyway. So it was like, okay. And I do think that just comes back to that person's insecurity. There are times that I think when it's a young adult who's just like, can you just tell me what you went through? I've asked the question, why do you need to know? And they've said, I just want to make sure I'm not alone. And I've never met someone who had it like me. and I feel like it was my fault. And I was like, the details don't matter. You matter. Like, you did not deserve that. So it allows me to speak into their pain. But then there are people out there that I really do think they just like to get a rise out of somebody just to be able to say, like, clearly, I think what it comes down to is this, is that someone looks at me and they go, you didn't go through crap, dude, because you're not on drugs. You didn't struggle with alcohol. You were never in jail. There's no way you can be normal. There's no way. I think it comes down to that. Because I don't come across as this person walking in the room who's like, here's all this crap. Look how broken I still am. Look how this has ruined my life. And that's what I think they expect from a lot of people who go through what I went through. But the truth is like, we need more people to say and show that healing is possible. Not fake it, but be true. Like, yeah, I still deal with some of that stuff from my past. And sometimes I think, man, if it could be different. I thought about that last night. Like, man, if it would have been wild if my parents could have been different. Life would have been so much better. But that's not my story. But I think there are times that people do look at me and they go, she can't be that if she went through that. And it's like, yeah, there's plenty of us who have been able to deal with that trauma and come out on top without having to show like I'm just a broken person who is never going to overcome this. But they won't say that part. They just ask, can you just tell me so I can weigh how bad it was for you? Because it doesn't make sense to them.
I wonder though, I mean, is this just like maybe it's not their fault. I mean, I've been going through this in my own head a lot too, with social media and the ways our society is kind of set up. We're constantly looking for validation. We don't care where that validation comes from. So maybe they just feel, in some way, they feel better or validated that they called you out or that they saw the trauma or something. Maybe we're creating these monsters.
I think that there's moments where people are looking for that dopamine hit, like a haha, I got you. We do it online. We see it a lot online. But what it really comes down to, if you ever heard, his name's Gary Vee. He's really like popular speaker. And he said, imagine being somebody who has to go around bullying somebody all day. Imagine then going online to seek it out, to go and find people to bully all day. They have to be a miserable person. So I think it just comes back to them, is that they are just so miserable that when they run into somebody, they're just like, you can't have a good day because I'm not having a good day. And maybe it's not intentional, maybe it's unconscious, where they're just that miserable in life that they're just like, I have to find every negative thing that I can find. Again, my story is from foster to PhD, from poverty to success. That doesn't happen often. So it's clear. Like, I used to teach for a while. I was a professor for a while, and I would have a lot of older students tell me, you're too young to teach me. You have nothing to teach me. And I'm like, yeah, I have nothing to teach you because you're not willing to learn. So I think, again, it comes back to, we're looking to be a victim. We are victim blaming and shaming. And then what we're doing is we're saying, you can't overcome because I didn't. And that is not a new thing. We hear a lot. I think what we usually hear are things like, well, you can't do that thing because I didn't do that thing. You can't go and finish school because I didn't finish school. What makes you think you can? But now it's because of social media. I think it's more in front of our face. But when we put social media down, flip the phone over, turn the notifications off, and start talking to people, you go, wow, what's all over social media right now is not actually happening in my community, in my state. There are some situations that are there. Yes, somebody just burglarized the store, or yes, someone got into a car accident, but it's not as much as I thought it was, because social media, it's every other reel is someone getting into a car accident. So now it's in front of my face, versus when I'm actually out there, I'm like, there's roughly 5 that I saw in the last 2-3 weeks. Oh, okay. So I think social media puts everything in front of our face, but we need to learn to put it down and say, who's actually around me? Let me have those conversations. They're going to be super awkward until we get to know people, but let's get to know people. A friend of mine says, touch grass. Go outside and touch grass when I'm feeling emotional. Did you go outside and touch grass? I'm like, no, it's fake. And she's like, go find some real grass and just go touch it real quick. Go out in the sun. Sit in the sun. Because that gets me out of the funk that I'm in, because I'm all fighting it internally versus just sitting somewhere and just be like, okay, let me change my scenery. Let me change. That's actually a good way to help procrastination, by the way, is to change your scenery. Go somewhere else. If you're sitting in the same place doing nothing, just go sit outside and watch how creativity can come into your brain and change how you're working.
Danisha, this has been a really great conversation. I could probably go on for another 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 hours, but
We could.
we are getting getting pretty close to the time here.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or anything you feel we should have covered but didn't cover today?
I think the only thing is that we fear too much. We fear taking the step out. We fear trying. So it's easier to talk ourselves out of trying. But we just need to try and see what happens. We can't control every aspect of our book or every aspect of the writing process. But if we get up and just try, we're going to be very surprised at what happens. We might sell one book. We might sell 250. But if you are a self-published author, they say that a good self-published author will sell at least 100 books in its entirety of that book. But most people are not selling more than 50 within the first 2 years. And it's like, if you sell 5 in the first month, you did great. And now it's like, okay, but if I don't try, if I have reasons to talk myself out of it, I'm never going to actually end up seeing if it works. Just try it and see what you can find and do. If you're going to make every excuse, you're going to find every reason why you're not going to, and then you're never going to get there. But the difference between a success and a failure is trying. Failure helps us, but how do we know that that's not one more door that we get to walk through if we don't try to open the door? So failure is not doing it. You don't fail if you try. You fail when you stop and you don't try.
Wow. Such a powerful note to end the show on. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And just before we go, what's the best way for, our listeners to, connect with you and, maybe even pick up some copies of those books?
Yeah. So if you can go to DanishaKeating.com. You can go to Amazon and just look Danisha Keating up and all my books will pop up there. But you can go to DanishaKeating.com and you can follow me on social media. It is one of those things that social media followings do allow for better presence, but I don't care about numbers. I just want to have people ask questions and be, I want to build a community. So if you want to follow me, you can. If you want to buy those books, you can go to Amazon.com and just look Danisha Keating up and it'll all pop up there for you.
Excellent. Just while all our listeners, don't worry, that is going to be in the show notes. So, easy to find.
Click there too.
You don't have to grab a pen and paper.
Just click the little links.
Again, once again, thank you so much, Danisha, for being on the show and taking time today. It's a really great conversation. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. And, just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try and be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
See you guys next time.